Right, let's see if my voice holds out through this. My brain might not. They called her Big Sal. Well, they would do, wouldn't they? It was above 6 foot, well above 6 foot, away the best part of 20 stone. And it only took one look at them forearms of hers to know that a struck chain for a living. That's right, it was one of them lady chain makers from Cradley Heath. And I mean, they didn't make the big anchor chains like the men did in teams of 2s and 3s. Oh no, worked on her own in a little shed at the back of her house. And it worked hard. And it's just as well her did. Because that drunken, idle, no good for nothing husband of hers, if ever he put in 2 shifts in 1 week at the pit, well, it's called for celebration. Well, there was going to be a fair held, and they were going to have singers, musicians, dancers, and they even got one storyteller. Yeah, I mean, in my case, I know how it feels, because in a folk club, I'm quite often the only storyteller there. But anyway, this fair was going to be held at a place that's come to epitomise the Black Country in these days. It's the junction of the Dudley No. 2 Canal. And in the background you've got the cob engine house and the tall chimney, and off to your left you've got the Netherton Tunnel. Now I'll tell you a bit about the Netherton Tunnel. The Netherton Tunnel runs beneath the Rowley Hills at a point where they reach almost 1,000 foot above sea level. It's just over 3,000 yards long. That's just short of 1 3/4 miles. It connects the Dudley Canal network up with the Birmingham Canal network. It's a very wide tunnel. I think it was the last canal tunnel to be built in England, actually. It's got a towpath all the way through it. You can still walk through there. If you do, make sure you take a couple of torches with you, because it gets very dark if they go out. Anyway, Sal decided to go to this fair. She set off from her house in Cradley Heath to walk it, no great distance. She was wearing this long black dress that reached down to the floor, with starched white collars. And when she got there, she met up with her 2 sisters, and they said to her, "All right, Sal, where's that drunken, idle, no good for nothing husband of yours?" I said, "I don't know, he's probably off somewhere getting drunk." And I said, "We don't know, you know, why you don't give him a good idea." And Sal gave her usual reply. I said, "Well, you know, that ain't my way." But anyway, there was going to be a sack race. Now I know what sprung to mind when I said a sack race here, when they used to get the old sugar bags and the kids used to get in, you know, before health and safety that was, wasn't it? You know, well, this wasn't going to be like that. Oh no, these sacks were going to be filled with 100 weight of coal, and they've got to be carried from one end of the Netherton Tunnel to the other and back again. But they weren't going to go through the tunnel. Oh no, that was too easy. They were going to go the 3 steep incline to the very top of the Rowley Hills, then down the even steeper incline down into Tividale to the toll house, turn round and come all the way back. Well, Sal's sister said, "Sal, why are you going for that sack race? You could beat any of these men. And there's a giant joint of beef for the winner." And Sal said, "Well, I would, but it's threepence to enter, and I've only got a penny." I'm sorry, yeah, hang on, you took me by surprise there. Now, I'll have to have a sip of water and think this over. You see, I've told this story all over the country, and that line, it gets a bit of sympathy. You know, I mean, us storytellers, that's what we rely upon. We rely upon sympathetic or appreciative noises. We don't get encores or anything like that. I mean, usually they have to see the back of the story. So anyway, We'll do that line again, shall we? It's threepence to enter. No, I only got a penny. Oh. Salman appreciated that. Anyway, her sisters, they weren't going to see her go without. They each gave her a penny to enter that race. She entered the race, and she walked up to the start line, and there was all these big strapping men stripped to the waist. And there she was with a long black dress and starched white collars. And when they saw her, they said, "Hey, Sal, what are you doing here? This race is for the men." But the sisters, they backed her up, as usual. They said, "Oh, what, you're not frightened of our Sal, am you?" They said, "Oh, no, if I want to make a fool of myself, oh, well and good." Well, they come under starter's orders. And Sal lifted that sack onto her shoulder, as easy as any of the men. The starter fired his pistol, and off they went. Now they knew it was going to be a long and arduous race, and they needed someone to entertain the crowd while the race was going on. So they got the storyteller. The storyteller got up, and well, he told stories of kings and queens, and you know, both beautiful and wicked, and beautiful princesses, and sea monsters and dragons. Well, he delighted that crowd, he terrified that crowd. He had that crowd in the palm of his hand. He had them under his spell, and that spell was broken when he uttered those inevitable words. And they all lived happily ever after. I hate stories that end like that, don't you? But don't worry, that ain't the end of my story. Oh no, this goes on forever, this story. Anyway, when the storyteller had finished, they got interested in the race again. There was a group of gamblers, and they'd all put money, and not one penny had been placed on Sal to win. And there was a lot of money on this race, and the gamblers started to look, you know, what's happening? Can you see anything? They asked this young lad, they said, "Get yourself up that tree and see." This lad got up and he looked. And he said, "Yeah, I can see somebody." I said, "Well, who is it? Who is it?" He says, "I think it's Big Sal." I said, "Oh, he's having us on. Wait till we get our hands on him." But within minutes, it became apparent that Big Sal was way out in the lead of all the others coming down that hill. And to a huge round of applause, Big Sal won that race. Come on, a big round of applause. You lot are hard work. Anyway, Sal obviously was happy, her sisters were happy. The gamblers weren't very happy. The wives weren't very happy. The bookmaker was delighted. But anyway, Sal went and he collected her prize, that huge joint of beef. She tucked it under her arm and said to her sisters, "I'm going home to cook this now, and if you come round ours in the morning, I'll give you your share." And off she went, back home to pay the beef. Well, she made the fire up in the range and she put the beef into roast. And it roasted away nice and slow, and he kept basting it, you know. Yeah, I missed my Sunday lunch. I never realised you're talking about this, but anyway, yeah, they were basting this beef, and it was roasting nice and gently. And after a bit, she put some potatoes into roast with some parsnips, and it was going away nicely, sticking away. The smell was brilliant. And then a drunken idle, good-for-nothing husband staggers in. And now, this ain't your average black country bloke. Now, don't get me wrong, you know, I mean, this is the exception to the rule. Anyway, he staggers in and says, "All right there, Sal?" He says, "Oh, I'm all right." He says, "I'm looking forward to my roast dinner." I said, "Oh, yeah, you heard I won the race." He says, "Oh, did you?" I said, "I don't suppose you had a shilling on me, did you?" "Well, no, I didn't." He said, so anyway, I said, "Oh, anyway." He sat down and he immediately fell asleep. Now, he's a real uncouth fella. He was sitting sitting there in front of the fire, snoring, grunting, and well, I don't know how to, well, he was farting as well. He was a real uncouth person, you know, anyway. He was going on, and Sal was still basting this beef, and it was roasting on lovely. And then it was cooked, but he was still there, fast asleep. She got the joint of beef and she cut it into 3 pieces. She wrapped 2 of them up in muslin and put them on the coal shelf for her sisters to collect the next morning. And then she sliced that 3rd slice up, the whole lot of it, and put it on a big plate, along with the potatoes, the parsnips, and a nice bit of gravy. And just before she sat down, because he was still fast asleep, you see, just before she sat down, she got a little earthenware jar, put it on the table, the old scrub table. She got the baking tray, and she poured the juices out of that into that. That's to make beef dripping, because they don't waste a thing them days. And as she did, she spilled a little bit on the table. Didn't take any notice. She sat down and she ate all that meat and the potatoes and the parsnips, the whole lot. He was still snoring, grunting, and you know what. Anyway, then she did the washing up, and then she come to clean the table off. And that little bit of fat that she'd spilled had gone solid, you know how it does. So she rubbed her fingers in it. And I went over to him, and I rubbed it all around in his whiskers, all round his face, and he just carried on sleeping and snoring all that day. And then, when I finished, I sat herself down by the fire. And he was fast asleep there. And eventually he woke up and, all right, I said, he said, I'm ready for my dinner now. I said, what? He said, I'm ready for my dinner. I said, you drunken old fool, how much have you had to drink? Don't you remember, you've had your dinner? He said, have I? Yeah, I said, look, you've still got a little bit on there. He looked at He said, I don't remember it, but it must have been lovely. He said, you do look after me, asshole. And he started to doze off again. And I said, oi, so if you're going to doze off, get yourself to bed. And he took himself off to bed. And I sat there, thinking it over, and I said, I could have given him a good hiding like my sisters told me to, but it's much more fun my way. Isn't it?